Sometimes the smallest treasures are hiding in plain sight. You know the ones, tucked away in a coffee can, a dresser drawer, or maybe even still jingling around in an old jacket pocket. Some coins, especially the ones we barely glance at anymore, hold stories, mistakes, and values that only reveal themselves when you take the time to look a little closer. Today, we're diving into two U.S. state quarters that have turned into serious prizes for collectors and sharp-eyed owners alike. What's fascinating is these aren't relics from centuries ago. These are coins from within many of our own lifetimes. Coins that might still be within reach if you know what you're looking for. Let's kick things off with one that carries the rugged spirit of the American West, the Idaho State Quarter. The Idaho State Quarter was released on June 4, 2007, as part of the massive and wildly popular 50 State Quarters program that ran from 1999 to 2008. If you think back, you might remember how exciting it was when a new design rolled out. Every few months brought a fresh reverse side honoring a different state. Idaho's design stands out right away. On the reverse, you see a peregrine falcon, wings partially unfurled, sharply detailed against an outline of the state's rugged borders. Just beneath it is the Latin motto, Esto Perpetua, meaning let it be perpetual, a reference to Idaho's hope for enduring prosperity and the preservation of its rich natural beauty. The choice of the peregrine falcon wasn't random. At the time the quarter was designed, Idaho played a critical role in conservation efforts that helped bring this once endangered bird back from the brink. In fact, the World Center for Birds of Prey, located in Boise, became one of the major players in peregrine falcon recovery programs. So even though the bird isn't exclusive to Idaho, its connection to the state runs deeper than most realize. At first glance, the Idaho quarter blends right in with the rest of your spare change. But like a lot of things in numismatics, the magic happens when you pay attention to the details. Certain versions of the Idaho quarter, thanks to minor mishaps at the mint, have become incredibly valuable over the years. One of the most exciting discoveries among collectors is the extra claw error. If you examine the falcon's talons under magnification, you'll notice what looks like an additional claw, a strange little artifact that wasn't supposed to be there. This particular error was likely caused by a die gouge or an accidental slip during die polishing. Whatever the cause, the result is clear, an unmistakable oddity that turns an everyday quarter into a valuable collector's piece. Beyond the extra claw, there are other reported issues, including minor double die obverse errors. A double die error occurs when the coin die itself shifts slightly between strikes, causing elements like United States of America, Liberty, or In God We Trust to appear slightly doubled under close inspection. These aren't always dramatic or visible to the naked eye, but a keen collector or a decent magnifying glass can make all the difference. Now, you might be wondering, what's the real-world value for these rarities? Well, it depends heavily on condition, as always. High-grade Idaho State quarters with the extra claw error have been known to fetch between $300 and $700 in auctions. A particularly pristine MS-68 example, meaning mint state with an almost flawless surface, has even crossed the $1,000 mark in select sales. For a coin that started life worth just 25 cents, that's quite the transformation. Even without an error, condition alone can make the Idaho quarter worth something. Uncirculated examples, those that were carefully preserved from the beginning, can bring $50 to $100 depending on eye appeal, mint luster, and collector demand. A perfect MS-70, a true rarity because of how easily coins pick up microscopic flaws during production, can sometimes see prices soar well above $400, especially when graded by a trusted service like PCGS or NGC. But not every Idaho quarter is a winner. Circulated examples, those that have clearly seen a lot of pockets, glove compartments, and cash registers, generally stay close to face value unless they boast an error. You'll know a circulated coin by its dulled surfaces, tiny scratches, and flattened high points. Look closely at the falcon's feathers or Washington's hair for signs of wear. Here's something that's often overlooked about the Idaho quarter. The story of its design approval wasn't exactly smooth sailing. When Idaho submitted design ideas for their state coin, there was some public disappointment and even a bit of confusion. Many Idahoans expected the design to feature famous natural landmarks like Shoshone Falls or the Sawtooth Mountains. When the peregrine falcon was selected, some critics argued it wasn't uniquely Idaho enough. But over time, that falcon has become an unmistakable symbol of Idaho's pride and conservation success, and ironically, it's probably made the coin more memorable in the long run. Adding to the Idaho quarter's appeal is its relative scarcity compared to some other state quarters. While millions were minted, the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced significantly fewer Idaho quarters than, say, earlier states like Virginia or New York. That lower mintage, combined with error varieties, creates the perfect storm for future appreciation, something seasoned collectors keep a close eye on. It's also worth mentioning that many Idaho quarters were heavily circulated, especially in western states, meaning truly pristine examples have always been harder to come by. A large percentage of them have been banged up, tossed around, and handled carelessly over the past decade and a half. That's why finding a gleaming, near-perfect example today feels like such a win. For collectors, especially those in their 40s and 50s who might remember the buzz when these quarters first launched, the Idaho quarter offers a satisfying blend of nostalgia, rarity, and genuine value potential. Whether it's tucked away in an old roll you saved back in 2007 or hiding in a collection you inherited, it's well worth giving your Idaho quarters a second look. If you spot that tiny extra claw or a perfectly struck, high-grade beauty, you might just be holding something far more valuable than spare change. A mistake made in a split second at the U.S. Mint could now be worth hundreds, or even thousands, of dollars in the hands of a savvy collector. And speaking of coins with unexpected twists and valuable surprises, let's move east from Idaho to another state that's rich in American history, Maryland. The Maryland state quarter has its own set of fascinating quirks and rare finds that have left collectors talking for years. Next up is a coin that might seem modest at first glance, but carries an incredible amount of history and intrigue, the Maryland State Quarter. Released on March 13, 2000, it was the seventh coin issued in the 50 state quarters program. Maryland's design choice leaned heavily into its proud Revolutionary War heritage. The reverse shows the famous Maryland State House dome in Annapolis, flanked by branches of white oak leaves, the white oak being the state tree. Just above, the word Maryland is framed by the title, The Old Line State, a nickname dating back to Maryland's critical contributions during the American Revolution. The Maryland State House itself holds a special place in American history. It's the oldest state capitol still in continuous legislative use and served as the U.S. Capitol from 1783 to 1784. It was here that George Washington famously resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, a move that helped solidify the new nation's commitment to civilian control of the military. So, while the quarter's design looks serene and traditional, the symbolism it carries is immense. Now, when it comes to collecting, the Maryland quarter becomes even more interesting once you start digging into its rarer variations and striking errors. For starters, the Maryland quarter was produced at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, but like with many early state issues, the quality control wasn't always perfect. And that's where the fun begins for collectors who know what to look for. One of the most well-known Maryland state quarter errors involves off-center strikes. These occur when the blank coin, called a planchet, isn't properly aligned in the press during striking. Depending on how far off-center the strike is, the value can climb steeply. A 5% off-center Maryland quarter might be a neat curiosity worth $20 to $40. But catch one that's 10%, 20%, or more off-center, and especially if the date remains visible, and you're looking at a coin that could bring $200, $300, or more at auction. Another fascinating error variety is the Maryland quarter struck on the wrong planchet. Sometimes, mistakes at the mint led to state quarter designs being stamped onto leftover planchets meant for dimes, nickels, or even foreign coins. A Maryland quarter struck on a 5-cent nickel planchet would be noticeably thinner and lighter, and incredibly rare. These errors are so unusual that collectors are willing to pay hundreds, even thousands, for authenticated examples. There's also been talk of double-die reverses with the Maryland quarter, though they're rarer and less dramatic than some other state quarters. Doubling can sometimes be seen around the words "the old line state" or in the oak leaves finer details. These double-die examples typically need magnification to confirm, but when properly authenticated, They can add $50, $100, or more in value depending on the coin's condition. So, what's the market value for Maryland state quarters today? Like always, condition is king. Circulated Maryland quarters, unless they have a major error, generally hover around face value. They're common, they've been used, and they show it. You'll see the high points on the dome and oak leaves flattened from years of handling. However, in mint state grades, the picture changes dramatically. An MS-65 Maryland quarter, meaning it has strong luster and few marks, but still not perfect, might fetch $10 to $15. Step up to MS-67, and you're easily talking $75 to $150 depending on how sharp the strike and how brilliant the surfaces are. Get into MS-68 territory, an extremely sharp, pristine coin, and values can push over $400 or more. These higher grades are scarce not because the mint didn't try, but because it's incredibly difficult to keep a soft, easily marked quarter in pristine condition from the moment it's struck all the way through packaging and distribution. Auction records for Maryland quarters are surprisingly impressive for a coin many people don't give a second thought. One of the highest known sales was for a 2000 P Maryland quarter graded MS-68 by PCGS that sold for over $1,500. It's a rarefied air reserved only for the best of the best, the coins that look like they were minted yesterday under a microscope. Now, here's a quirky fact about the Maryland State House dome featured on the coin. It's the largest wooden dome in the United States constructed without nails. Every beam and plank was held together using wooden pegs and craftsmanship techniques that date back to the 18th century. It's an architectural marvel that has survived centuries of storms, political upheaval, and even minor earthquakes, all while remaining an active seat of government. That same spirit of quiet endurance is something collectors appreciate about the Maryland quarter too. It's not flashy. It's not adorned with mythical creatures or sprawling landscapes like some other state quarters. Instead, it quietly celebrates stability, heritage, and craftsmanship, both in what it depicts and in how the coin itself must be preserved to maintain value. When you're hunting for valuable Maryland quarters, keep a few things in mind. Look for crisp, bold strikes, particularly in the tiny, intricate details of the State House and the oak leaves. Weak strikes, where the design looks mushy or incomplete, aren't nearly as desirable. Also, always check for clean fields, the flat areas of the coin, free of heavy nicks, scratches, or bag marks. Even one small blemish can knock a coin down a full grade and take hundreds of dollars off its value. It's also worth mentioning the Maryland quarters in special finishes. The U.S. Mint issued collector versions of state quarters in both proof and silver-proof sets. Proof coins, struck with specially prepared dies and given a mirror-like finish, are stunning but usually not valuable unless they carry additional errors or remain in ultra-high grades. However, silver proofs, struck in 90% silver rather than the normal clad composition, have the added bonus of intrinsic metal value. A flawless, ultra-cameo silver-proof Maryland quarter could bring $30 to $50 on a good day, and more if silver prices spike. And don't overlook coin rolls or unopened mint bags from 2000 that might still be floating around. Sometimes entire rolls yield unusually high-grade coins that can be sent in for grading, and what you thought was a humble $10 roll of quarters could turn into a multi-hundred-dollar find if you get lucky. For those who lived through the launch of the 50 state quarters program, the Maryland coin evokes a unique sense of pride and nostalgia. Maybe you remember hunting for new releases at the bank, carefully sorting through pocket change, or filling up the colorful collector maps that became so popular back then. Maryland's quarter, with its steadfast, dignified design, reminds us that even modest designs can conceal exceptional stories and, occasionally, exceptional value. So whether you've got a few rolls tucked away, a proof set in a drawer, or a random quarter at the bottom of a coin jar, it's worth giving your Maryland state quarters a second look. A small detail like an off-center strike, a wrong planchet error, or even just an almost flawless surface could turn what looks like everyday change into a serious payday. Together, the Idaho and Maryland state quarters prove something that every seasoned collector knows in their gut. It's not always the oldest, the flashiest, or the most hyped coins that bring the greatest rewards. Sometimes, it's about knowing what others overlook. It's about seeing value where others see commonality. and it's about enjoying the hunt as much as the discovery.